Maverick News presents.
Good evening. I'm Rick Walker. Welcome back to the Maverick News Channel. There's a lot going on tonight. We will give you the highlights, the top stories of the day, including information on this ceasefire resolution, which has been approved at the United Nations. We'll talk about Canada airlifting some citizens from Haiti. China accused of cyber spying on a huge scale by Western governments, including Canada, the United States, UK. Trump, dual legal stories there. The hush money trial, the fraud trial. We'll try to make some sense out of that for you. Another arrest has been made in Russia in connection with the Moscow terror attack at the Crocus City Hall shopping mall and concert venue. And we have more. There's even more than that. So don't go away. When we come back, we'll jump right into it right here on the Maverick News Channel.
Fighting the Great Reset by leading the Great Resistance. Maverick News. The antivirus programs for your mind. Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, defending free speech, Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay, the United Nations Security Council tonight is demanding an immediate ceasefire between Israel and the Palestinian group Hamas in the Gaza Strip. The Security Council is also calling for the release of all hostages. Now, there was a vote at the UN on this, the United Nations Security Council voting. And the reason it passed is because the United States abstained from the vote. The remaining 14 council members voted in favor of the resolution. It was proposed by the 10 elected members of the council. There was, of course, substantial discussion around the room. We go now to get. We're going to pick up the comments from, first off, the United States representative at the Security Council.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the top, I want to express my deepest condolences to the families and loved ones of last week's terrorist attack in Moscow. We condemn terrorism in all its forms and stand in solidarity with the Russian people in grieving the loss of life from this horrific event. Colleagues, today this council spoke out in support of the ongoing diplomatic efforts led by the United States, Qatar, Egypt, to bring about an immediate and sustainable ceasefire, secure the immediate release of all hostages, and help alleviate the tremendous suffering of Palestinian civilians in Gaza who are in dire need of protection and life-saving humanitarian assistance. The United States fully supports these critical objectives. In fact, they were the foundation of the resolution we put forward last week, a resolution that Russia and China vetoed. But colleagues, the United States' support for these objectives is not simply rhetorical. We're working around the clock to make them real on the ground through diplomacy, because we know that it is only through diplomacy that we can push this agenda forward. We're getting closer to a deal for an immediate ceasefire with the release of all hostages, but we're not there yet. Now, let's be clear. A ceasefire could have come about months ago if Hamas had been willing to release hostages, months ago. Instead, Hamas continues to stand in the way of peace, to throw up roadblocks, cower in tunnels beneath Gaza cities and behind under civilian infrastructure and hide among the civilian population. So today, my ask to members of this council and to member states in every region of the world is this: speak out and demand unequivocally that Hamas accepts the deal on the table. Now, I hope I'm wrong, I really do, but I don't expect that from Russia and China, especially because they still can't bring themselves to condemn Hamas's terrorist attacks on October 7th. Just last week, Russia and China vetoed a resolution that condemned this horrific attack, a resolution the vast majority of this council supported. They have shown time and time again that they are not actually interested in advancing a durable peace through diplomatic efforts, nor for all their rhetoric are they interested in making any meaningful contributions to humanitarian efforts. Instead, they are using this devastating conflict as a political cudgel to try to divide this council at a time when we need to come together. It is deeply, deeply cynical, and we should all see through it. Colleagues, we appreciated the willingness of members of this council to take some of our edits and improve on this resolution. Still, certain key edits were ignored, including our request to add a condemnation of Hamas. And we did not agree with everything in the resolution. For that reason, we were unfortunately not able to vote yes. However, as I've said before, we fully support some of the critical objectives in this non-binding resolution. And we believe it was important for the council to speak out and make clear that our ceasefire any ceasefire must come with the release of all hostages. Indeed, as I've said before, the only path to a durable end to this conflict is the release of all hostages.
Okay, so we'll move on here now and pick up comments from the UK. Here we go.
President, the United Kingdom has long been calling for an immediate humanitarian pause leading to a sustainable ceasefire without a return to destruction, fighting, and loss of life as the fastest way to get hostages out and aid in. That is what this resolution calls for and why the United Kingdom voted yes on this text. President, Israel continues to reckon with the brutal horror of the October 7 attacks, and innocent hostages continued to be held by Hamas in Gaza. Israel has a right to defend itself and ensure such an attack can never happen again. We regret that this resolution has not condemned the terrorist attacks perpetrated by Hamas on the 7th of October. The UK condemns these attacks unequivocally. This resolution sets out the urgent demand for the unconditional release of all hostages, and we welcome the ongoing diplomatic efforts by Egypt, Qatar, and the United States to this end. The intense suffering of innocent Palestinian civilians in Gaza shows no sign of abating, and a humanitarian catastrophe is unfolding before our eyes. The resolution sends a clear and united message on the need for international humanitarian law to be upheld and for aid to be scaled up urgently, including the lifting of all barriers impeding its delivery. President, the UK Foreign Secretary and Prime Minister have reiterated these messages in our contacts with Prime Minister Netanyahu and other senior Israeli political leaders in recent weeks. We call for this resolution to be implemented immediately. President, we need to focus on how we chart the way from an immediate humanitarian pause to a lasting, sustainable peace without a return to fighting. That means the formation of a new Palestinian government for the West Bank and Gaza, accompanied by an international support package. Removing Hamas capacity to launch attacks against Israel. Hamas no longer being in charge of Gaza. And a political horizon which provides a credible and irreversible pathway towards a two-state solution of Israel and Palestine living side by side in security and peace. I thank you.
Okay. Let's go to Russia. And we're going to pick up at the end here,
Mr. President,
Palestinian, and then Israeli comments.
distinguished colleagues. Russia voted in favor of the draft resolution prepared by the 10 non-permanent members of the Security Council. It is of fundamental importance that the UN Security Council for the first time is demanding the parties the observance of an immediate ceasefire, even if it is limited to the month of Ramadan. Unfortunately, what happens after that ends remains unclear, since the word lasting could be interpreted in various different ways. And that is very telling. Those who are providing cover for Israel still want to give it a free hand. We very much want to believe that this wording will be used in the interests of peace rather than advancing the inhumane Israeli operation against the Palestinians. The wording permanent would be more precise, and we are disappointed that it did not make it through. But nevertheless, we believe it is fundamentally important to vote in favor of peace. Nevertheless, the Council must continue to work on achieving a permanent ceasefire. We also note what is contained in the resolution, the demand for an immediate and unconditional release of the hostages. On the 22nd of March, there was another very tragic day in the history of the Security Council, when through intrigues and blackmail, they tried to put us on the wrong path and to coerce us to adopt a document that not only didn't contain a demand or at least a call for a ceasefire, but essentially was presented, as the permanent representative of Algeria said on that day, as a license for the further killing of Palestinians. Neither we nor our Algerian and Chinese colleagues could allow that. From the first day of the escalation in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict zone, the Russian delegation has been calling upon members of the Security Council to respond to the unprecedented upsurge in violence with precise and an unambiguous demand for an immediate, permanent ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. And so doing, fulfilling its mandate for the maintenance of international peace and security. Today, during the vote on our amendment, we once again saw the true face of our colleagues on the Security Council, and we realized who truly wants to end rather than suspend the inhumane Israeli operation. We would like to point out the following. What took place today is a response to those who criticize the veto power of the permanent members of the Security Council, because if we hadn't used it, if Russia and China hadn't used it on the 22nd of March, instead of a short text that could end the violence in the Gaza Strip, we could have ended up with a very harmful text in the US resolution that not only didn't demand a ceasefire, but also essentially would have given Israel a license to continue its actions against the Palestinians, including in Rafah.
Okay. Enough of that. And we are going to go here now to the Palestinian representative. And we will also get the Israeli perspective on this. And here we go.
Has doubled down in the commission of its crimes. Your leaders have said in no uncertain terms that Israel is responsible for the famine underway in Gaza and has used starvation as a method of war. They have called on Israel not to use humanitarian aid as a bargaining chip. They spoke of a man-made disaster, meaning an Israeli occupation-made disaster. They have called repeatedly on Israel to stop its indiscriminate bombing and to spare civilian life to no avail. They have called repeatedly on Israel to give civilians safe haven. Instead, it attacked them even in hospital and UN shelters. It attacked them in the very places it asked them to heed to. It killed them if they stayed and killed them if they left. And now it continues to threaten a ground operation in Rafah, where it has pushed them and confined them at the very edge of the Gaza Strip in yet another attempt to forcibly displace our people. Instead of heeding these calls, Israel has attacked those making them. It continues, in particular, its incitement against the UN, its Secretary General, whom we salute him from this place, its agencies, notably UNRWA, the lifeline for Palestinians in Gaza. The Israeli Foreign Minister wrote that UNRWA cooperates with terrorists and that the UN has become, under the leadership of Antonio Guterres, and I quote, an anti-Semitic and anti-Israeli body that shelters and emboldens terror. Defend the Secretary General and the UN. This outrageous incitement has real-life consequences for UN and humanitarian staff on the ground who are targets of attacks, who are killed, arrested, and tortured, who are humiliated and harassed. It has also real-life consequences for Palestinians, as Israel has used it as a pretext to block humanitarian aid to be distributed by UNRWA. It is time for all these Israeli actions to trigger a serious international reaction, one that enforces consequences for these crimes rather than just make pleas that Israel continues to dismiss. There is no humanity when our lives are treated as expendable. There are no rules without enforcement. And Israel has been treated as a state above the law for so long that it feels it no longer has to hide when acting as an outlaw state. From ethnic cleansing to genocide. Our agony is caused by Israelis' actions, but also by the impunity it has been afforded, by the fact countries have not taken decisive measures to stop it, and many continue to call it and treat it as an ally even while it is committing such atrocities. Mr. President, we express our appreciation to the E10, all of you, for having put forward this resolution, and we welcome its adoption by the Council. We thank Algeria for representing us and all the Arab countries in this endeavor. We salute Arab unity in demanding immediate ceasefire and prevail. This must be a turning point. This must lead to saving lives on the ground. This must signal the end of this assault of atrocities against our people. A nation is being murdered. A nation is being dispossessed. A nation is being displaced for decades now, but never at this scale since the Nakba. Never this openly, from Tantura to Gaza, from 1948 to 2024, we have endured. We have survived. We have resurrected only to face death once again. Life must prevail in Gaza. Must prevail in Gaza. Freedom must prevail in Palestine. For 6 months now, every single Palestinian in Gaza has endured untold suffering, loss, pain, and tragedy. This must stop now. Palestinian hostages, Palestinian victims are not less deserving of compassion and empathy, of outrage and solidarity. They must be freed from fear and want, from siege and occupation, from death and dispossession. Families must be reunited and start to heal, at least from the wounds that can actually be healed. They must be given the chance to bury their loved ones, to mourn their loss, to rebuild what can be. Even if the ceasefire happened now and the siege was lifted now, it would take generations to deal with the trauma and the devastation. Mr. President, now that this council has finally called for a ceasefire, all forces should coalesce to make sure it is enforced. Apologies to those who the world has failed, to those that could have been saved and were not. Save the lives of those who survived against all odds. Tell them help is on the way. Hold accountable those who inflicted such suffering upon them. End this injustice. End it now. All of this is long overdue. And I thank you very much, Mr. President.
I thank the permanent observer of the Observer State of
And we'll
Palestine
go to
Forces.
Israel next, I believe.
I now give the floor to the representative of Israel.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, at the outset, I want to express my deepest condolences to the Russian people and to the families of all the victims of the heinous terror attack on Friday. Terror must always be condemned in the harshest terms. The Security Council was justifiably quick, very quick, to condemn Friday's terror attack in Russia, just as it was waited no time to condemn the terror attack in Iran against a police station back in December. Yet still, to this day, the Council refuses to condemn the most widespread and barbaric massacre suffered by the Jewish people since the Holocaust. At least 137 people were murdered at Crocus City Concert Hall in Russia on Friday by radical jihadists. And yes, almost 6 months ago, nearly 400 people were murdered at the Nova Music Festival in Israel by the radical jihadists of Hamas. Why does the Security Council discriminate between Russians murdered at a concert and Israelis murdered at a music festival? Civilians, dear colleagues, no matter where they live, deserve to enjoy music in safety and security. And the Security Council should have the moral clarity to condemn such acts of terror equally, without discrimination. Sadly, today as well, this council refused to condemn the October 7th massacre. This is a disgrace. Colleagues, it was the Hamas massacre that started this war. I repeat, it was the Hamas massacre that started this war. Nearly 6 months have passed, and the Security Council still has not condemned the child-murdering rapists that began this war. The resolution just voted upon makes it seem as if the war started by itself. Well, let me set the record straight. Israel did not start this war, nor did Israel want this war. Israel engaged and withdrew from Gaza 18 years ago. He wanted a ceasefire and coexistence. You repeat here slogans and purport to know for the Palestinians what the Palestinians seek, but this don't make it the truth or the reality. The Palestinian representative here is lying through his teeth when he says that his people want to live side by side with Israel. Why, as you probably know, he does not represent Hamas. He does not represent the Gazans. They did not choose him to speak. To even condemn the massacre. He continued to pay terrorists. Hamas, a terrorist organization. They elected a terror organization. Hamas converted every inch of Gaza into a terror war machine, right under the UN's nose. Maybe with the help of initiated ceaseless acts, thousands and thousands of indiscriminate rockets, missiles at civilians. Today, Hamas is the most popular movement among Palestinians. And according to every poll, the vast majority of Palestinians support Hamas's massacre on October 7th, not only in Gaza, also in Judea and Samaria. This is the reality you should face and you should address. Colleagues, while the resolution fails to condemn Hamas, it does state something that should have been the driving moral force. This resolution denounces the taking of hostages, recalling that it is in violation of international law. Taking innocent civilian hostage is a war crime, and there is no arguing that this is what Hamas has committed. The release of the hostages should have been the #1 priority. When it comes to bringing the hostages home, the Security Council must not settle for words alone, but take action, real action. It is unfathomable that when it comes to releasing the hostages, we still only see inaction. Not a single step has been taken by the Council, aside from symbolic words. Yet, when it comes to the situation in Gaza, the Council rushed to take action. You appointed a special coordinator and established a monitoring mechanism. The Council visited Rafah to see the aid shipments firsthand. And the Secretary General has already visited Rafah crossing twice. Why do our hostages not receive concrete action? What have you done to advance their release? Colleagues, following this Council's adoption of UNSCR 2712 and 2720, which both called for the release of all hostages, Hamas did not stop to even contemplate for even one moment. It should be very clear that as long as Hamas refuses to release the hostages in the diplomatic channels, there is no other way to secure their return other than through a military operation. So on the one hand, the resolution says that taking civilian hostages is in violation of international law. Yet, on the other hand, despite the fact that you know Hamas won't listen to your calls and release the hostages, you demand a ceasefire. Take a moment and think about this moral contradiction. Your demand for a ceasefire without conditioning it on the release of the hostages not only is not helpful, but it undermines the efforts to secure their release. It is harmful to these efforts because it gives Hamas terrorists the hope to get a ceasefire without releasing the hostages. All members of the Council, all members should have voted against this shameful resolution. Mr. President, where are these Council's actions? Why don't you designate Hamas as a terror organization? Even if there are Council members here who would prevent this due to their political alliances with Hamas leadership, where are the moral efforts to advance such a designation? I wish to suggest an alternative text that should have been adopted by the Council if it wasn't so biased against Israel. The Security Council strongly condemns and deplores all abuses of human rights and, where applicable, violations of international humanitarian law by the terrorist group, including those involving violence against civilian populations, notably women and children, kidnapping, killing, hostage-taking, pillaging, rape, sexual slavery, and other sexual violence, recruitment of children, and destruction of civilian property. The Security Council demands that the terrorist group immediately and unequivocally cease all hostilities and all abuses of human rights and violations of international humanitarian law and disarm and demobilize. The Security Council demands the immediate and unconditional release of all those abducted who remain in captivity. The Security Council recognizes that some of such acts may amount to crimes against humanity. Well, colleagues, I did not draft this text. You know who did? This Council. This is the resolution adopted by the Council 10 years ago when Boko Haram kidnapped the schoolgirls in Nigeria. So I ask you again, why can this Council call on Boko Haram to lay down their arms, but the same cannot be demanded of the murderous Hamas terrorists? Is the life of little baby Kfir Bibas worth less than the life of Nigerian child? Sadly, it's for the same reason why you can condemn terror attacks in Russia and Iran, but not in Israel. To this Council, Israeli blood is cheap. This is a travesty, and I'm disgusted. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Israel for their statement.
Okay. So with that, we're now in a place where I guess we have to wait to see what happens. The United Nations Security Council demanding immediate action, but will we get it? I don't know what's going to happen. It only takes one side to keep the conflict going. Shots fired, it all continues. You really need both sides in the conflict to agree, want on some level for the violence to stop. I'm not sure we're going to get it. Here, let's go to the White House for a portion of the White House briefing where they're going to address this. Admiral John Kirby taking to the podium, and the ceasefire, the dominant topic of discussion there, as expected.
The two leaders will have follow-on discussions as they have, as appropriate throughout this conflict.
Thank you. You say it's not a shift in policy.
He's referring to the U.S. abstaining from the vote, which allowed this to pass. They didn't veto it.
Why again? And to the charge that by even abstaining, because normally there may be some attempt at the Security Council or the UN overall to condemn Israel every so often for whatever reason. The U.S. usually stands up and vetoes those resolutions. Here now, for the first time in a while, the United States is at least abstaining and allowing it to go through. So the perception broadly is that the U.S. has no longer got Israel's back when it comes to conversations like this with the UN.
Yeah, that's just not true, Ed. Nothing could be further from the truth, quite frankly. Of course, we still have Israel's back. I mean, as you and I are speaking, we are still providing tools and capabilities, weapon systems, so that Israel can defend itself against which we agree is still a viable threat to Hamas. Again, no change by this non-binding resolution on what Israel can or cannot do in terms of defending itself. But, you know, the other day, Friday, when I was up here, Brian was asking me about, you know, how come it was okay for or not okay for Russia and China to veto a resolution that we drafted on Friday when we vetoed similar ones prior to it. And my answer then is going to be my answer today because of the substance of it. The ones we vetoed didn't condemn Hamas. This one didn't condemn Hamas, which is why we couldn't support it. But we didn't veto it because in general, unlike previous resolutions, this one did fairly capture what has been our consistent policy, which is linking a hostage deal and the release of those men and women with, of course, a temporary ceasefire.
There are U.S. officials today saying Netanyahu's acting this way because he's facing some domestic political pressure. There's domestic political issues going on. Aren't there also domestic political pressures facing President Biden? And that's part of the reason why y'all are allowing this to happen today?
I can't speak for
members of the Democratic Party saying he's doing this wrong. You got the general public suggesting his support for Israel is misplaced. Is that part of why this is going through?
No, absolutely not. And I got to take issue with the premise of the question. The president makes decisions based on the national security interests of the United States. And this decision to abstain on this resolution is in keeping with the national security interests of the United States. And quite frankly, it's in keeping with the national security concerns of the Israeli people.
Customs and Border Policy, or Border Patrol chief yesterday suggested in an interview that the situation at the southern border is a national security threat because of the roughly 140,000 known gotaways, or those that crossed the border and were detected as crossing illegally. Is that the position of the whole Biden administration of the White House that the situation down there remains a national security?
The president has spoken to this. I mean, he's talked about the urgent need for additional funding for key capabilities at the border. And if you care about the border, if you care about the security of the border, and the president sure does, then we ought to get that national security supplemental passed. That's what that funding will do. There's only so much that he can do through executive action. In order to get more resources, to prevent more people from getting in illegally, you got to have funding.
But a national security threat is going a little further than the broad concerns of the president, and more specific.
DHS monitors all available intelligence at the border every single day, and we're certainly aware that there could be national security threats that can arise at the border, which is why we're arguing so hard to get additional resources and capabilities down there.
Two questions on Israel. I know you said earlier today that the meetings with Defense Minister Elon weren't necessarily supposed to be a replacement for the delegation that was supposed to come here this week, but how much of those conversations with senior officials naturally become about alternatives to Rafah, what the intent of the meeting was supposed to be this week?
Well, I also said I fully expect that Rafah will come up in the context of these conversations, the one he's having with Jake right now. I think he's going over to the State Department this afternoon, and of course at the Defense Department tomorrow. Absolutely, I think we'll have an opportunity to talk about Rafah, but it probably won't be a full replacement for what we were hoping to do with a broader, larger delegation of Israeli counterparts. That said, and I also said earlier today that just because this meeting is now not going to happen doesn't mean that we aren't still going to look for an avenue and an approach to be able to share those alternatives with the Israelis.
And following up on what Steve asked, doesn't this whole episode speak to a pretty poor state of relations between U.S. and Israel right now? And how much is the president losing his ability to influence Bibi Netanyahu with everything that's happening?
Israel's still a close ally and a friend. The defense minister is here as we speak, just in the other room. We still have a very close relationship with our Israeli partners and with the government in place. As we've said many times, it doesn't mean we're going to agree on everything, and by goodness, we don't. But that's what friends can do. You can disagree, you can have those conversations, but we all recognize how important it is that Israel still be able to defend itself. At the same time, making sure that humanitarian assistance is getting in, civilian casualties come down, we get those hostages out.
Thanks, Admiral. Just following on that question, how would you characterize the relationship in specific between Netanyahu and President Biden, since he didn't call President Biden to notify him about the cancellation of this delegation visit? Is their relationship at a new low?
I wouldn't describe it that way at all. I don't really have much more to add. I think I got the same question on Friday. These are two leaders who have known each other for going on now 4 decades. And they haven't in the past agreed on everything, and they don't agree on everything right now. But they both agree on one really important thing, and that is the importance of the state of Israel, the importance of the security of the Israeli people, the importance of making sure that an attack like the 7th of October doesn't happen again.
But is the president concerned about that Rafah invasion now moving forward in a way he doesn't want it to, since he's not able to have this?
We have the same concerns about a major ground offensive in Rafah that we had yesterday and the day before.
And just lastly, an administration official said there could be domestic political reasons for why Netanyahu responded in the way he did. Could you elaborate on what those domestic issues in Israel could be?
No.
Admiral, is it your expectation that the defense minister has with him the kind of operational details you've been looking for on a potential Rafah mission? Do you think he possesses that, and would that likely come up in the meeting?
Oh, he's in the top of the chain of command of the Israeli Defense Forces, so we're quite certain that he has enough visibility on what their thinking is about Rafah to be able to share that if he chooses to.
Does the president feel the delay of this other delegation meeting that he wanted? Is there a sense that there is an urgency in terms of lives when you're considering humanitarian crisis we've talked about, potential for military operation? Does he view this kind of a delay on that sort of meeting as potentially causing much further harm to those in Gaza or this very delicate situation?
Well, there's 2 ways to approach that. I mean, one is we haven't seen any indication that the Israelis are imminently getting ready to conduct a ground operation in Rafah. And we have not seen their plans for that, operational plans for that. So there's no, just to be clear, there's no sense right now that this is about to happen in coming days. Now, when it would happen is, of course, be up to the Israelis. But so just in terms of timing, it seems like they're a ways off here from actually moving into Rafah. That said, Does the president feel a sense of urgency about the suffering in Gaza? Absolutely, which is why we've been pushing so hard to get additional crossings open, get more trucks in, even while we're negotiating for a hostage deal, still trying to do everything we can to improve the humanitarian situation on the ground, continuing to do airdrops. Now we've got this temporary pier that's at sea, moving its way over to the Mediterranean as we speak today. The president's put a lot of energy and effort, and made the team put a lot of energy into effort into alleviating that suffering. Yes, there is a keen sense of urgency.
Thank you, Admiral. Now that the Israelis have canceled this visit, is the U.S. moving closer toward withholding or conditioning weapons to Israel? Is that something that Secretary Austin might raise during his meeting with the Israeli Defense Minister tomorrow?
I'm not going to get into hypotheticals and speculate about that one way or the other.
Why does the administration believe that the right path for the U.S. here is to conduct these airdrops, to build this pier, but not to leverage everything it can, including conditions on weapons, to open up more land routes and better protect civilians in Gaza?
I would take issue with this idea that we're not leveraging everything we can. First of all, it's not a leveraging exercise. It's not about trying to use some sort of power dynamics here with our good friend and ally Israel. It's about helping them defend themselves. I think we need to remember what happened on the 7th of October. Number two, from the very beginning, we have, at the same time as we've been providing them the capabilities, we've also been able to influence some of their decisions on the ground and some of the way they have prosecuted operations, and including increasing the amount of humanitarian assistance that gets in. It's not enough. I recognize that. A lot more needs to be done. But we believe you can do both at the same time, and that's the approach that we've been taking.
John, on this resolution that the U.S. abstained to today, that was within the power of the United States to block, the Prime Minister said it gives Hamas hope the international pressure will allow them to accept a ceasefire without the release of our hostages. Is he wrong?
Yes.
Does the U.S. still have leverage to change language of future resolutions now that this language, without the Hamas component, has been put into place?
Well, let's see. I mean, there's just voted on this non-binding resolution today. I don't know of additional text that's coming, but we'll take each one in turn.
And quickly on the border, is the administration still considering executive action on the border?
I don't have any announcements to make with respect to executive action. I would remind that this argument that the president hasn't taken executive action or is just not true. He has kept American troops down there at the border. He has worked as commander-in-chief with the government of Mexico to improve their ability to try to stem that flow and to go after fentanyl traffickers. I mean, it's not as if he hasn't, but there is a real limit that what really needs to be done, if you really care about the border and stemming the flow, is additional resources. And the president can't just sign those into being. You got to have funding behind that. You have to have a checking account for that. And that comes from the power of the person. That comes from Capitol Hill.
So is there nothing more that he can do outside of
I'm not going to get into anything more he would or wouldn't do. I certainly won't get ahead of the president's decision space on this. But the idea that he hasn't taken executive action when warranted is just not true. He has. But there is a real limit to executive action in terms of what's needed down there. What's needed is funding more than anything. And again, for all the people out there expressing concerns about the border, number one, we share those concerns, which is why the president put, billions of dollars into a national security supplemental to give the Border Patrol, to give the customs courts additional resources. You got to have funding for that.
Some of these meetings are proceeding this week. Can you help us understand what the American position, what the alternative is? What would you have suggested to the Israelis?
Well, because I think we're going to still continue to try to have those conversations. I'm going to let those conversations happen before announcing it from the podium.
Can you tell people when those conversations might happen? At least through the regular channels?
I wish I could.
Is there hope of talks happening?
I wish I could right now. But I mean, this decision just happened in the last couple of hours, so we're gonna have to see where it goes.
Is there any circumstance that the U.S. would support a Rafah operation in the future? Are you ruling it out entirely, or are you ruling it out?
We've been very clear. We don't believe that a major ground operation in Rafah is the right course of action, particularly when you have 1.5 million people there seeking refuge and no conceived plan, no verifiable plan to take care of them. We've been very consistent on that.
Thank you so much. On the non-binding thing, the UN Secretary General said after the vote, this resolution must be implemented. You say it's non-binding, so who is right here? And If it's non-binding, if, as you say, it does not change anything, why has the administration blocked so many pretty similar resolutions in the past?
Because they didn't condemn Hamas. I've said that repeatedly.
It doesn't condemn Hamas either.
Because they didn't condemn Hamas, and because they also just called for a ceasefire with no linkage to the hostages. This one, the reason why we can't support it but didn't veto it is because it does link hostages and a ceasefire, which is in keeping with our policy.
And on the binding thing, is it binding, non-binding?
It's a non-binding resolution.
John, Steve asked this question earlier, but what was the president's personal reaction to the Israeli delegation canceling their trip, given that he had personally requested that they make this trip to Washington?
I have not talked to the president, so I don't have his personal reaction.
On the UN security.
Okay, so I think that's enough. We're seeing that it is a non-binding resolution. That means it doesn't really have any teeth. Now, at least not beyond reaction, a response from the public, from you. How will the world respond to this? What kind of pressure internationally? What's public opinion going to bring to bear on this? That's really where the weight to enforce this comes from, because the United Nations itself can't enforce it. It's a non-binding resolution. One side or the other can just say, no, we're not going to recognize this and just keep on fighting. And it only takes one side to remain aggressive, and nothing changes. So I guess we cross our fingers and hope for peace at this point. And then I was thinking about the aid situation. You know, the United States kind of gets it on the chin here, in my view. They're damned if they do, damned if they don't, accused of, being responsible for all of the problems, really, by many. Not everybody, but a lot of people. And when you look at the aid that is being flown in, airdropped, the United States by far has provided the most aid. Now, of course, they're also providing weapons. So it just illustrates how war makes absolutely no sense, because you end up dropping food either on people who are going to be bombed, or in some cases, people who are already dead. So it doesn't really make sense. And we've seen that time and again in war after war after war, where various countries drop aid into areas where the conflicts continue to rage, while at the same time dropping weapons in over there so the fighting can continue. But as I was thinking about the airdrops of food, I just wanted to review what countries have actually participated in providing aid to Gaza. And so the most recent information that I've been able to find is, of course, that the United States is the biggest supplier of aid by far. And we're looking at a couple of methods for transporting that aid in at this point, which is by land via trucks, which is very slow. And in some cases, and in a lot of cases, they're being blocked from getting in by Israel for security concerns and military considerations, I guess. So that's been very slow and not entirely effective. And then you have the United States airdropping aid in there, including food. But even that stuff is inspected before it's airdropped in. So by air, the US, Jordan, Egypt, France, the Netherlands, and Belgium have been dropping aid into Gaza this month. The first aid drop by the US on the 3rd of March was carried out with Jordan's Air Force, and that included 38,000 meals. C-130 cargo planes were used. And then, of course, the U.S. took another public relations hit when some people were apparently killed when pallets of aid actually landed on some civilians. So I guess the best of intentions wound up with tragic results, clearly not intentional. So I'm just looking at those are the countries this month that have been sending aid into Gaza. It makes me wonder where some of these other countries sitting around that room at the UN, where are they at with all of this? Why aren't more countries stepping up? If it's, I'm just, wondering why is it always left to the US, to the UK? I know that earlier on, Russia did send some aid, for instance, but I'm not seeing any indication that aid has been forthcoming more recently. Now, the information I have may not be entirely thorough. Russia may be providing more. I don't know if China is stepping up to the plate here. I'm not seeing any indication of that in any information that I looked up today. But a lot of virtue signaling going on all around the world. And yet it really is apparent that the aid going in is both inadequate and coming from only a handful of countries. I think that's that in itself says a lot to me. I don't know what it might say to you. But let's move on to other news. I think we've addressed that adequately for this evening. It's just a waiting game now. Wait and see. Will this result in an actual ceasefire? If it does, how long will it last? Will hostages be released? I don't get the sense that either side in the conflict, the Israelis or the Palestinians, really want to quit. They seem to want to fight both sides. At this point, it doesn't seem like they want peace. So even with this resolution passing, I think the world wants peace. I don't think these two sides are ready for it. Even if there is a ceasefire, my prediction is it will not hold for long.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals. Defenders of individual rights and freedoms. Credible. Trusted. Grounded in reality. Maverick News. Maverick News. Defending free speech. Free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Too late. Too late. Too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay, over to London we go now, where farmers were protesting. They drove tractors in a slow motion convoy towards Parliament, protesting post-Brexit rules and trade deals. The farmers say that these deals endanger their livelihoods and food security. Here, we'll roll this a little bit. Okay. So that's what things looked like in London, England. We saw a whole line of tractors, many of them flying Union Jacks or signs that read "Stop Substandard Imports," referring to food imports, of course, agricultural imports. Now, Britain hasn't really seen large-scale farmers' protests like we've seen in other countries like France and some other European countries. Farmers from 27 different European Union nations have been protesting at various times against what they see as unnecessary bureaucratic rules, clean air, soil targets, restrictions on the use of fertilizers, of course, all of it government driven, concerns from government or apparent concerns about climate change. The farmers say these policies, these globalist policies, are driving them toward bankruptcy. Now, agriculture in the United Kingdom has been affected in very heavy ways by Britain's exit from the European Union. It took Britain out of the bloc's free trade zone, and sort of complicated rules for farming and trade between different EU countries. And then we got Brexit, and the farmers now protesting the UK's policies with regard to imports and, of course, the way that they are allowed to market and sell their products as well. So polls show that the public backs the British farmers, and they want high standards for the agricultural industry. They also, though, indicate from recent polling that they support local producers, locally produced, domestically produced produce, foodstuffs. And the farmers are just saying these trade deals for agricultural products between European nations and the UK are decimating the farm industry, their livelihoods, putting everything at risk. Now, in another breaking news story tonight that is developing, rapper Diddy's Los Angeles home has been raided. Homeland Security swooping in. This in connection to a sex trafficking investigation. They've raided a number of Diddy's homes. He has more than one, apparently. A number of women have come forward accusing Diddy of beatings, sexual assaults, and more. And we have footage here from one of the scenes. I'll share it with you here now.
First ones
Fox
here
News.
with about 30 different law enforcement vehicles at least. There are 3 Bearcats on scene here. This just all unfolded, Sandra, I would say, less than 10 minutes ago. We got here even before the crime scene tape came up. So we're just down the hill. If you look up this street where Tony is right now to the right, you'll see one of those Bearcats, and law enforcement. And on the other side of those bushes, basically, is that home that is registered to Bad Boy Films, which is part of Bad Boy Entertainment. And the home in particular is registered not only to Bad Boy Films, but to one of P. Diddy's daughters.
They are heavily armed, and they've been very tactful, would probably be the best word to use, as they made entry into this home this afternoon. We actually watched them as they made their way through one of these side gates, and as soon as they got inside the home, one of the first things they did was made their way into this garage that you see is open right there. Now, they did take a couple people into custody. We witnessed that. Now, are they under arrest? Are they just being asked about what they know? That I can't answer, but I can tell you there's 3 people right there that were taken into custody, were inside that home at the time of the raid.
We did see see a bunch of investigators going in, making the raid in there and clearing that as well. So they're going to do a thorough search as they conduct this raid. And so far, Stu, from what I understand and from Haley on the ground there, they have not seen, and we have not seen from our vantage point, any sign of Sean Combs, the 54-year-old who is believed to be the property owner of this.
This is like a super major operation. Multiple locations. Look at all the officers and the resources involved. That's heavy duty, to say the least. That's going to court for sure. And we'll be hearing a lot more about that, I'm sure, in the weeks ahead. Stay with me. I'll be right back.
The information war is raging. Truth without integrity is worth nothing. Maverick News. Because those who have power and those who seek it must be held accountable.
The world is watching.
Join our family of truth seekers. Donate today and add your voice to the chorus of Maverick Knights. Donate at maverickdonations.com. Truth. Integrity. It's the Maverick way. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Maverick News. Fighting for freedom.
Okay, so in other news, the United States, the United Kingdom have accused China of being involved in a huge spy campaign. So U.S. and British officials today filed charges and have imposed sanctions after accusing Beijing of cyber espionage, a coordinated campaign. U.S. and U.K. officials are alleging that this campaign affected millions of people and targeted lawmakers, academics, journalists, and companies, small, medium, large, including defense contractors. Authorities have identified a group, a hacking group known as Advanced Persistent Threat 31, or APT 31, calling it an arm of the Chinese Ministry of State Security. So we don't have all the details at this point, but American officials said the hackers have been involved in a decade-plus spying spree, as they described it, which they say compromised defense contractors, dissidents, and a variety of U.S. companies, including companies involved in steel production, clothing, textiles, energy. Some of the targets were also providers of mobile phone services, mobile phone equipment, 5G mobile phone equipment specifically. And even the spouses of some senior U.S. officials and lawmakers were targeted. Obviously, if you, say, go after and hack into an account owned by the wife of, say, a judge or a political official, a politician, you can intercept some pretty juicy information that way. You don't have to tap into the phone of the public official directly, you could go after the wife, right? And get the deep, dark secrets that way. So in this indictment, which was unsealed today, against 7 of these alleged Chinese hackers, U.S. prosecutors said in court that the hacking resulted in the confirmed or potential compromise of work accounts, personal emails, online storage, and telephone call records, which belonged to millions, literally millions of Americans. So I know people are always worried about our government spying on us, and some people are worried about the Chinese. But in this particular case, it's our government and our police security authorities telling us that it's the Chinese that have been involved in a cyber espionage program that has targeted both government, corporate, and civilian targets for at least a decade. Chinese diplomats in the UK and the US have dismissed these allegations today as saying that they are unwarranted. The Chinese embassy in London says the charges are completely fabricated and are malicious slanders. So, of course, this stuff, I guess, is going to go to court, at least on the US side, and we'll see if this carries any weight. And if it does, who would be held accountable? Who might go to jail? I don't know. We do know that, especially right now, we're in a position that is unprecedented in terms of cyber warfare, information warfare, cyber espionage, 5th generation warfare. And I would say every country is engaging in it in one way or another. And we do know that U.S. companies are targets for all kinds of different hacking because they have secrets, trademarks, copyrighted material, patented information, designs, technology, especially defense contractors, which would be privy and would be protecting military secrets. So it's pretty clear why they would be targeted. Pretty concerning stuff. And I would say that aspect of this third world war, which we are already in, is really paramount, primary. It should be an area of extreme concern for all of us. And I think that given the nature of the technology, the social media realities that we're facing right now, our legislation really should be adjusted in ways that would, how can I put this, address the issues of free speech, free expression, rights of even journalists in a way that properly balances it against cybersecurity threats and the way information can legally be distributed into the public sphere. I'm not sure that the way some of the older laws are written are adequate to deal with this kind of information, both from an industrial, an economic, a fiscal perspective, but also a national security perspective. Now, tonight in Haiti, things are still spiraling out of control, so much so that the Canadian government has started to airlift citizens out. At last word, the Canadian government had been using a helicopter and removed, I believe, 18 people from Haiti. We're going to go to Ottawa now and pick up this with Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly.
I would like to begin by stating that we welcome the passage of the UN Security Council motion today calling for a sustainable ceasefire in the Middle East. This is something Canada has been calling for since December of last year, and we continue to do so because the violence must stop, all hostages must be released, Hamas must lay down its weapons, and much more humanitarian aid must be able to reach Palestinian civilians in Gaza. Now, the reason why I'm here is to talk to you about Haiti today. Haiti is known for its beautiful culture and its welcoming people. Canada shares deep connections with the people of Haiti, and many Haitians have chosen to build their lives in Canada. They're our neighbors, our friends, our brothers, and our sisters. We know that the Haitian people have been facing multidimensional crisis, a security crisis, a humanitarian crisis, and a political crisis. Gangs are terrorizing the streets. Women and children are scared of getting out of their homes, and corruption is running rampant. And now the gangs have taken the airport, leaving no way to leave Port-au-Prince without putting families in danger. As a government, our number one priority is always the safety of Canadians at home and abroad. For nearly 2 years, we have advised Canadians not to travel to Haiti due to the security situation in the country. At the same time, we know that the security situation has deteriorated in recent weeks, and those who wish to leave are unable to do so because of the security situation at the airport in Port-au-Prince. This is why today we are launching an assisted departure for the most vulnerable Canadians in Haiti. We have also deployed diplomats and consular agents across the region to make sure that we can support this work. We will be facilitating the travel of the most vulnerable Canadians in Haiti to the Dominican Republic. At present, the Dominican Republic has strict eligibility requirements for all those entering the country. Only Canadian citizens who have a valid Canadian passport will be eligible for this assisted departure. The same requirements applies to our allies and our partners, including the US. This is why we are working for other Canadian and family members, as well as permanent residents and their family members, to be able to have access to other types of assisted departure options. Canada has a policy of not separating families. This is my priority. And since Canadians are in particularly vulnerable situations right now, we've made the decision to begin the operation now with these parameters in mind. With the passport requirement of the Dominican Republic in mind, Global Affairs Canada has reached out to Canadians who have inquired about departure options to inform them of this option. This list is currently less than 100 people, with less than 30 Canadians interested in leaving immediately. We are prioritizing the most vulnerable Canadians, for example, those who have a medical condition or those who have children. 18 of those individuals left today and will continue throughout the week. I would also like to take the opportunity to speak to those who might be watching in Haiti and Canadians who have loved ones in Haiti. Please register with Global Affairs Canada and let us know if you need assistance in departing the country. The information to do so can be found on my social media or on the Global Affairs Canada website. I'm now here with Judy Sunday, the ADM for Consular Affairs, and also in charge of hostage release, and we are here to answer your questions. Thank you so much. Merci.
Merci. We'll start in the room with Laurence Martin from Radio Canada.
Okay. We had enough of that. I think it's pretty clear what's going on. So 18, airlifted out so far. Everything in Haiti, basically out of control. Gangsters seizing control over much of the country, and it's violent. So a lot to be concerned about down there. Take another quick break, come back. We'll talk about the arrest of another suspect in connection with that Moscow terror attack, which we will touch on just briefly tonight. Stay with me.
News. The world is watching. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay, so in Russia, 63-year-old Israel Islamov and his 2 sons have been arrested for accused of aiding the terrorist attackers who killed over 130 people at the Crocus City Hall in Moscow, shopping mall and concert venue. Here he is making a court appearance. Israel. Looks like something might have happened to his eyes. Looking a little black. I wonder why. So, of course, all kinds of speculation out there. A lot of people making a lot of claims that, like, they know what happened. I don't know how. Some people just seem to be clairvoyant, I guess. They've got it all figured out. A handful of journalists out there drawing attention to the conditions of the Moscow terror suspects. Here's Al Jazeera. Moscow theater attack suspect shows signs of beating in court, it says.
Hi, I'm Ashley.
Let's pull this down for a moment. So just as I say, a handful of, we'll bring this up, a handful of news outlets, not very many, focusing on this as a matter of concern, but a few are, including Al Jazeera, because we have seen video of, well, we talked about it, the suspect having his ear apparently cut off, allegedly. Being paraded into court here. This guy here, basically unconscious, wheeled in. The Al Jazeera caption here: the men, all citizens of Tajikistan, showed signs of severe beating. The men, all citizens of Tajikistan, all severe beating. They were all charged with terrorism. And Al Jazeera saying as well that the attack was claimed by an affiliate of ISIL or ISIS in Afghanistan, ISIS-K. And in recent years, ISIS has evolved. It has changed. Its network has changed. The way it's structured has changed. And, maybe we will get more information on that for you in the days ahead to further provide perspective and real truth, hopefully, at some point. And we did see, video that was released by Russian authorities that some journalists are saying is of extreme concern because of the way the prisoners have been treated. We may be hearing more about that and in the weeks ahead as well. I don't know. As I say, not a lot of people focusing on that and giving it much attention, but a few. The Trump cases, 2 Trump cases. There's the hush money case, which he's dealing with, involving hush money over the Stormy Daniels thing, which is back in court again. And then there's the fraud case, where he was ordered to pay hundreds of millions of dollars. That amount now reduced and delayed, the amount that he has to put up for a bond, to 100 and what was the amount? 100 and, oh my goodness, 130 million now instead of 400 and some million. Something, it's somewhere in that range. And he's been given a little bit more time to come up with money. But if he's not able to, come up with this cash, it's putting his real estate assets, his assets, period, in jeopardy, because they can be seized and sold in order to pay his fine. So Trump's not in a great position, but this was a big win for him in court to get the amount lowered that he has to come up with right away. And also it's a win because it gives him, I guess, a little bit more time. So we have reaction from Donald Trump on this tonight. He says that what he should be paying is zero, of course. Says that this is entirely political. Here he is.
Illegal what they're doing, it's criminal what they're doing, and it's never been done before in this country. You can't have an election in the middle of a political season. We just had Super Tuesday, and we had a Tuesday after a Tuesday already, and we had Louisiana the other day, a couple of days ago, and we won in a record number, the highest number ever recorded. But we're in the middle of an election right now, and we're fighting crooked Joe Biden, who's the worst president in the history of our country, by far.
It continues to divide the country. So there's so much to go with these cases. I honestly have trouble keeping track of it all. And I'm kind of at the point with it, just to be frank, where there's so much of it going on, all this litigation, all this lawfare, that it's hard. It barely holds my interest anymore. It's just part of the background noise for me. But if it finally morphs into something extremely substantial, then I guess it will get more of my attention. But so far, right now, it just seems like political theater. It's hard for me to get terribly focused on it and to inject much of it into the newscast. There's so many cases that you can't even keep the information straight anymore from one case to another. It just gets to be confusing. But he could even lose his golf course over this. Because if he's not able to come up with the cash, they'll liquidate stuff. So the appellate division, First Department, ruled today that Trump can't post a bond in the amount of $175 million to cover the $464 million judgment while he appeals the decision. So this was decided by a panel of 5 judges. Trump was given 10 more days to come up with this $175 million. In this order, it says, I've got it up here on the screen finally, it is ordered that the motion is granted to the extent of staying enforcement of those portions of the judgment, 1, ordering disgorgement to the Attorney General of $464,576,230.62, conditioned on defendants' appellants posting within 10 days of the date of this order and undertaking in the amount of $175 million. It's all summed up basically in 2 pages. Huge news for him, really. It's a big win because it gives him some breathing room, and he might actually be able to come up with the cash now. And of course, he's asset rich, cash poor, so to speak. And I don't know, it's probably not easy to sell a major building or a golf course in the space of a couple of weeks and get the market value for it. When you're put under that kind of pressure, I think you're looking at a fire sale, essentially. Got to move it, got to get the cash, got to pay my fine. Lawfare. That's what you see in countries that really around the world, honestly. Because, especially in banana republics or, well, even major powers, when a government has serious opposition from an opposing politician or political party, they'll target those people. The sitting government uses their authority and power as the sitting government to target their opponent legally, to the point of even throwing them in jail. And if they can't throw them in jail, they'll do exactly what they're doing to Trump, which is to just tie them up in court, wear them down, use up all their resources, soak up all of their financial resources, force them to spend it all on legal matters instead of their campaigns. That's a question that some reporters and even the public have had for Trump. It's like, what are you using your campaign funds for? Are you using it for your legal defense, or are you using it for the campaign? Where's the money going? Questions that will arise and continue to persist as the election season continues and we work our way toward November. And that decision on who will be in the White House for the next 4 years, very hard to say. Donald Trump, Joe Biden, somebody else, RFK Jr., maybe, long shot, maybe. Tomorrow, RFK Jr. announcing his running mate. We're going to carry it live here on the Maverick News Channel starting, I believe, at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. So you're going to want to tune in for that. I will be accompanied by Lori Spencer, who has been working on the campaign. I do not work on any campaigns. She's been working with the RFK Jr. campaign, so she will bring intimate knowledge of the current situation over there in the RFK Jr. camp, and she'll bring it over here. You'll get information here on Maverick News that you will not be getting anywhere else. Guarantee you that. What else do we have tonight? I think we've kind of got most of the heavy-duty news covered. Maybe we'll go to the phones here in a few minutes, or maybe right away. I think we can do that. But, I don't know if I want to talk about I don't know if I want to talk about some of these stories that we've been dwelling on or focusing on so much over the last week. The Moscow shooting, the situation in Gaza. Let's maybe try and focus on some other topics, some other stories tonight. Call in. Let's, I'll try and prompt you guys, help you out with some subject matter that we can maybe talk about. But if there's anything else on your minds, and I can't say that we're necessarily not going to talk about that stuff, but I'd just like to try and move on and cover some other topics, because there is a lot of other stuff going on in the world, right? So let's see if we can do that. Here's the number to call. Okay, Mavericks, it's call-in time. Join the conversation. Call now, 1-519-401-1373. One 519-401-1373. Exercise your right to free speech. That's 1-519-401-1373. That's 1-519-401-1373. Maverick News. Call now. The world is watching and listening to you.
Maverick News. The world is watching. Maverick News. The world is watching. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay, and we're back, and we have Michael on the line. How are you tonight, Michael?
Oh, great, my friend. Long-time listener. I've been on the channel for quite a while. Figured that's a good time to call and talk in, maybe with a Canadian perspective of what's going on here.
Sure, yeah, and specifically, what would you like to discuss this evening?
Well, maybe I'll put it out there. When you look at what Putin claims as a pretext as an invasion to Ukraine is basically NATO being pretty much pushing on his door and encroaching, basically a threat of national security, as they put it, which it's a term we've heard on this side of the sea quite a bit. And I mean, when you look at a lot of the Chinese infiltration into the Canadian politics and situation, it's you could almost liken it to where maybe it's raising a little bit of hair on the United States back, as if you were to put it into the similar context.
I'm not sure I'm following what you're saying. What's your position on this? I guess is what I'm saying. Just get you to explain.
A position is it, whereas so if Putin is saying, well, NATO is coming in on my back door, right, I'm going to bolster against it, maybe U.S. would be in the perspective of saying China is coming in on our next door through Canada, and maybe we should bolster against that.
I see. Yeah, I think there is actually real concern about that with some officials and even just some political groups on the U.S. side of the border. I think that what you're saying is a matter of concern for some people. Yes.
Yeah, well, that's basically something. I was willing to because I mean, when Tucker took and did that speech with Putin, there were very few global leaders that were called out by name, yet our beloved Justin Trudeau was one of them. And he literally put him in the same basket as Zelensky.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So there again is another, when you read into it. He's then going out and saying that Canada and the agenda that they're taking and is a threat to Russia as well. Right. That's another country that see, as a Canadian, I'm blessed with our beloved Justin so long that I can see a lot of the blunders in his political strategy, and it's really I don't think there's very many countries that he hasn't raised the ire of.
Did you find it odd at all that, or even interesting, I guess, to see Canada mentioned, even almost singled out for just a moment in that Tucker Carlson interview with Vladimir Putin, the reference to Canada, especially it struck me as being a point of note in particular, because Tucker had just visited Canada, had just addressed that auditorium full of people. It was a controversial visit to Canada. He made that strange phone call to the prime minister saying that he was going to come to Canada to liberate the country, then goes to Moscow and Canada is mentioned again. Did you find any of that something that is that on your radar at all? Does that strike you as odd or anything?
It's interesting you brought that up, because I definitely noticed that. But I've seen it from a little bit of a different perspective too. I read it into a little bit of Putin's strategy and behavior a little bit. You see, the way he mentioned it, it's almost like he knows that the West is on. How did he say it? It was on there's a lot of woke agenda, right? So he might be able to sway people on that side if he tries to bring something like this up, right? So it's almost like he says, well, maybe I'm going to play into your way of thinking. And if oh, look at your guy here, he's bringing in these people into parliament and whatnot. So maybe even to try and sow a little bit of dissent in the country, but more or less that he's well aware of what's happening with our societal structure and what's being pushed by that. And it's almost like he tried to jump on that and maybe to take advantage of it and throw it in our face. That's how I saw it.
Okay, so we've also seen on the U.S. side references to possibly even invading Canada. You've seen, what's his name there, the young guy, Jackson Hinkle, say that he would like the United States to come up here and basically invade Canada and take it over. You've had Tucker Carlson saying that he wants to liberate the country. You've had Lieutenant Steve Rogers essentially take almost a similar position with his SOS campaign and express direct concerns about Chinese influence and infiltration in Canada and focusing on that as a national security threat in his view for the United States, and laying that out in many live streams and videos that he's posted. And then you see Putin referencing to Canada. It seems to me that in some way Canada is itself in play, and the country is also in a volatile, destabilized position right now with tons of protests, people upset, the sitting government hitting new lows in terms of support and popularity. Justin Trudeau being, incredibly low approval ratings in the polls. The Liberals clearly would lose the election. The Conservatives would win a majority if there was an election held today. Do you find these references and all this, it seems like there's an unusual and unprecedented amount of interest in Canada by these people from other countries. Thoughts?
Well, it is a convenient distraction or a focal point, right? But when you look at it globally, I mean, we take something as simple as one of what they pushed through here, so a firearm agenda, right? Well, the U.S. is also seeing that. Australia has seen that. It is a globalist agenda going through everybody, but it's very easy to paint it on one party or group. But don't get me wrong at all. I have no love whatsoever for the group or the guy. But I mean, it's not something that's limited to the country. There are bigger forces in play like that, right? And that's how I see it. Is we can't just focus on him. I mean, even if we do get Pierre Poilievre elected, we might see a halt to some of those regulations, maybe a reversal of a few, but mark my words, half of them will stay. And you know very well that government is very reluctant to give up any money or any control that they have, regardless of the situation.
Mm-hmm. So how do you feel about having the United States take over Canada?
I don't think it's honestly a solution for anything. Violence and mass or force it's been a temporary solution, but it never wins it in the end. To me, we don't need more control or more regulation or more, even another nation helping. We need our own folks helping. We need to decentralize the mess that we've got and take away a lot of the power from the folks causing it and take care of our own problems. I mean, to me, our provincial governments are more than capable of handling these situations without the burden of a lot of this federal issue we have.
Mm. So do you think Canada is in danger of breaking up with some provinces wanting to separate?
could see that working a lot better than I could have definitely a foreign invasion. I mean, there's always been talk of being an Albertan myself, right? There's always been talk about Saskatchewan and Alberta and Montana and that, right?
Yeah.
But this is usually the political sense has always been the same out in this area. But the federal agenda that this last almost decade has definitely changed things out here.
Yeah. How are you active at all in anything political out in Alberta? Do you even go out to like protests, or do you just observe, or what's your level of activity?
Well, I definitely make my voice heard. I don't do anything, public, but it's. I could definitely try to influence a few people and whatnot, and I'm in a rural area, so it's, for a lot of the folks are in the same mind. It's not as though there's that much to be done here, and you probably think, get out there and do something. More to make your voice heard or whatnot. But we've seen we know what Christia and her band of folks is up to out here. So there's still folks in court from this area trying to deal with peaceful protest years ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a difficult choice to make to get your family into. When you decide to do something like that.
So just bottom line for you, is Canada going to survive, or is it going to break up, and we're going to see some sort of separation take place?
If you'd like my idea of what would happen, it's a little bit different than what I think is going to happen, but I don't think it's going to break up. In all honesty, the demographic has been shifted to the point where it can break up. You look back to the referendum back in Quebec, and back in the day, there was close. What was it, 1-2% that they had back then, Rick? They almost, were free of Canada, whether it was right or wrong. They almost had that vote, right?
They did.
And now, with what's, with a lot of the globalist agenda, I won't even say it's our federal government agenda, because as I feel as they're a shill for the globalist government. And if you were to have that same referendum vote in Quebec right now, do you think they would even hit 40%, 35%?
I don't know where we would be. There are some very strong feelings on the issue of separation in Quebec and in Western Canada. I think the country is very unstable right now, but where the vote would end up on it, I have trouble gauging that, because I'm sort of in my own little political bubble here, and I really at times have to step outside that bubble to try to get a wider perspective on things. My perspective is skewed because I have people from within our Maverick family here who are around me all the time, right? So I'm seeing that proportion of the forest. I don't see always the larger sense. So as I sit here right now, I'd need to find a way to get a wider perspective on it to figure out where the mood of the nation really is. I sense that it's very unstable and very emotional people who do want to separate, but I don't know if they have enough.
Yeah, that separation is very confusing. Very confusing term. There's that separation from Canada doesn't mean we can't separate from the federal structure we have. There's a big difference, right?
That's true.
If all the provincial leaders were to sit down and say, look, we've had enough of this structure. We're taking our control back. we're reforming a Canada 2.0 without the burden of this federal overhead. Look, this system was put in when we had monarchy, and you needed a horse and a cart to send a message across the country. You know, love him or hate him, Donald Trump proved one thing very well. You can reach the whole country and more with one tweet. So why do we have the burden of all of this overhead? I mean, this stuff has been around for centuries. I mean, they changed the anthem on us, the English part, of course. Well, why can't we look at reforming this system a little bit? If those provincial ministers could sit together and say, okay, we're going to scale this federal role back to make it more like the monarchy, more of a role where it's a figurative role. The provinces are going to take care of taxation, okay? We're going to put a flat tax on everything, the same in every province. You're not going to be able to cheat it. Whenever you make a transaction, it's going to be taken off, 5%, 7%, whatever. No more income tax, period, right? That money stays in the provinces. They don't have anybody telling them how to spend it. They don't have anybody telling them how to manage it. They're local, and they're accountable to the people in that area, okay? I mean, I don't have that many solutions, but that's kind of what it couldn't really be that much worse. I mean, our military has been defunct to the point that poor folks, where the technology is so outdated, where if we had any sort of foreign incursion into Canada, U.S. would take over immediately as a threat to national security. So why? I just don't get it, right? It's federal, and then the money they fund a lot of the country with all of this federal agenda. It's just not beneficial to any of the provinces. Now that's it, but
interesting.
That's my rant for the day.
Okay. Well, listen, thank you, Michael, for calling in. It's been an interesting conversation. I appreciate you doing that.
Okay, Rick, thanks for the chance.
All right. Look forward to the next call.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
And that was Michael. Let me just hang on a second. Here. Okay, we have Sandy on the line here next. Hello, Sandy. Welcome back to the show. I didn't quite hear you there, Sandy. What'd you say?
I said, how you doing?
Well, I'm doing just fine. It's great to hear your sunshiny voice on this sunshiny. It's Monday, right?
Well, I call it Munya.
Munya? Well, I'll tell you, it was
Manya.
Well, I don't know what the weather was like where you are today, but it was just one beautiful day here.
It was gorgeous here. It was sunny and 8. There was no flurries, no squirrels, no protesting.
No squirrels, no knife yielding.
Knife fighting squirrels. Well, I said squirrels, no squirrels.
which we saw on the program last night with the squirrel in the tree with a knife. Yes, she brought that video for us.
That's hilarious. The knife fighting squirrel.
Yeah, well,
fighting the night of nights.
Oh my! Well, clear blue skies here today. I was out.
Here too.
It was gorgeous here today. So.
It was very nice today. It was like 8 degrees. I just had my rain hat on, and I'm like, okay, I'm just going here now.
And tell people what part of Canada you're in.
I'm in the Kawathas.
Okay. And for our American friends, would you explain where that would be on a map?
That would be north of Toronto, about 4 hours.
Okay. All right.
So there you go.
Yeah. So what did you want to talk about tonight besides the weather?
Oh my gosh, I've been following you forever.
Mm-hmm.
And you have the most amazing topics on your show.
It's called the news.
I call it the new news. I think Isabella would would agree with me on that. The new news.
Oh, you know what, Sandy? I've got a story that I want to share with you and our viewers tonight. This made me laugh this morning. Okay.
Go for it.
Okay. This story just shows us all how we have all been sucked into the matrix. All right, to the point where reality no longer really exists for people. Okay, this is what happened to me this morning. I worked late, very late into the night last night, so I got up a little bit late. But somebody came to my door, and it's a client of mine who wants some computer work done. So he knocks at the door, rings the doorbell. So I get my dog settled down, and I'm still in my pajamas. I'm still in my pajamas. Yes. So I get Cosmo calmed down, and I get to the door, and I answer the door in my pajamas because I'm, I'm a pretty classy guy.
Okay.
Right. So I answer the door, and of course, you know that I've been banned on Facebook. Right. Yes. So this customer, this client of mine who is looking to have me do some work for him, he's standing at my front door. Hey, how are you? Oh, I'm good. Everything's great. But
be safe when you answer your door.
But he says to me, how do I get a hold of you? And I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, how do I get a hold of you? I'm standing there. I'm like, well, here I am. Right? I'm like, you're there and I'm here. You're talking to me. You have a hold of me. Right? And he's like, yeah, but I can't message you on Facebook. What's wrong? I said, well, I'm banned on Facebook. She says, so how do I get a hold of you? I'm like, you have a hold of me. You have me. Yeah, but how do I reach you? This is it. We're talking. It was like we couldn't. I guess you can't talk to somebody. You can't contact them anymore unless it's online. Face to face is no good anymore. It must be done in the matrix. I was like, what has the world come to where I have a human being standing right in front of me, asking me how he can get a hold of me to talk to me. Like, we are face to face. We can just talk to each other right now. But no, he had to do it on Facebook.
Tell me who it was, even though that we're online. You probably can't even tell me who it was.
No, nobody here would know who it is anyway. It's somebody from my town. He lives in my neighborhood. He came. That's the other thing. He doesn't live far from me. He was out walking his dog. He just has to walk over to my house, which he finally did because he's been trying to reach me for a while, right? He's like, how do I get a hold of you? Well, you just did. Yeah, it made me laugh, right? After he left and I closed the door and I went back upstairs, I was just thinking about it. And I thought, this just shows how crazy the world has become, where human beings.
Well, first of all, you just can't go up to someone's door and knock on it and say, hey, I like,
As Walter well, you can. I mean, that's the thing. You absolutely can. You can come to my door and ring the doorbell.
People leave their doors open, and it's like you can walk in at any time. Not that I would, and there's nothing wrong with it.
Just, how do I get a hold of you? Well,
Walter Cronkite, I know.
Yeah, well, see that as Walter Cronkite would say, folks, that's not news, but that too is reality.
That's reality.
That's reality today. But it's actually not real. Now reality is no longer good enough. It must be done in the matrix.
Yeah, but
online.
Is it? Yeah, well, like that's kind of iffy these days and times, the way everything is going, and you just have to just know your neighbors.
Yeah, and
just be friendly.
It was like I was. What was it? Was it like I was not real? I was just like some, weird manifestation appearing in front of him, an apparition.
We're humans.
Yeah, we're human beings. We were two human beings actually doing it the old-fashioned way, just interacting. But even we're so disengaged from people these days.
Absolutely.
And I think it got a lot worse during the pandemic with everybody isolated. The people would rather text even than have to speak to someone on the phone like you and I are doing right now.
Yeah, I have 3 sisters. I have siblings, and I'm the middle child. So it's like, well, I'm texting you. So if I don't hear from you, then I know you're okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like no news is good news.
Oh, well, anyway, that's the way I woke up late. It was mid-morning. I'd sort of slept in a little bit because I was up working through the night, but for much of the night anyway.
Well, I hope your neighbor is safe and fine and doing well. And we have neighbors. We have people. We're not all robots. We're not robotic. We're just humans. We need... we need to be connected, but we also need to be aware and what's going on and who is who and where we are and what we're doing.
Well, there you go.
Right?
So,
thank you, Cosmo.
Yeah, you can hear Cosmo in the background, right?
He's such a doll. So are you.
Oh, well, I'm glad that you called. You always brighten my day. You've got the most... Your voice is full of sunshine, and I love to hear it. So
thank you. I just called in to talk about protesting because this protesting stuff, especially in Toronto, like I was born in Toronto, and it's got to stop. It's got to stop. You know what? They're bringing too much into it, too much emphasis in the protesting and the negativity. And it's got to stop. It has to stop. Whether you know who doesn't like it, whether you know who likes it. You know what? The United States, the president of Biden, he's old.
Yeah.
He's just old. I want to see some new people come in to presidency and clean it up. It's just too much. We already went through a pandemic 2-3 years now. It could be coming back. I don't want to come back to another pandemic.
Me either.
No. Yeah. I don't want it. It's just we need to know our space, our boundaries. We need to be safe at all times. Like, you are the best journalism in Ontario as far as I'm concerned. And I think Lori would agree with me on that.
Oh, well, I just try to do my best. That's all I'm trying to do here.
No, you bring the best information that is going on in the world today because some people don't even have it and they need to be in the know.
Well, thank you. I
There's
appreciate
people
the
now
vote of
here
confidence.
where I am that don't even know what's going on.
Oh, I know that.
That's my drift.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I wish I had a dog. I want a dog again. I want a dog.
Well,
I can't have a dog here where I am, but maybe in the future, maybe I'll have a dog.
Well, you can share Cosmo with me online in the digital matrix.
I already adopted him. So.
I still have to make a video or something to.
I had a collie dog, and her
here.
name was Cappy. And she wouldn't even go down in the basement because she hated going down there. And I'm like, what the heck is wrong with you?
Well, listen, Sandy, let's wrap it up here. Give me a final thought before we move on.
We need peace. I can't say enough about it. You know what? War is hard. Peace is hard. War is easy.
Yeah, that's true.
Isn't that true? It's very true.
Very, very true.
Peace is hard. War is easy.
I've used that phrase many times myself.
Yes. Me too as well. Yeah. And for you, Sir Rick, you're the best.
So are you, Sandy. Thank you for calling in and brightening up my day. Everybody's day here.
Thank you for the story. I will keep that in my brain.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I'll talk to you again soon.
Talk soon.
Okay.
Thank you,
Bye.
hon.
See ya.
Cheers.
And that was Sandy. Hang on a second here. Okay, folks, we're going to take a quick break here. You can call in at 1-519-401-1373 and exercise your right to free speech tonight here on the Maverick News Channel. Okay, Mavericks, it's call-in time. Join the conversation. Call now, 1-519-401-1373. One 519-401-1373. Exercise your right to free speech. That's 1-519-401-1373. That's 1-519-401-1373. Maverick News. Call now. The world is watching and listening to you. All right, we're back. And you can call at 1-519-401-1373. That's 1-519-401-1373. CTV News tonight, picking up a story, honestly, that we had, oh my, it must have been 2 weeks ago now, week and a half, 2 weeks ago, about a secret RCMP report that forecasts, well, here, I'll show you what they are saying about this online tonight. Forecasting a bleak future for Canada. Here it is here. Here's their headline. Secret RCMP report forecasts a bleak future in Canada. A secret Royal Canadian Mounted Police report paints a dark picture of Canada's future obtained through an access to information request. The heavily redacted document outlines troubling trends to prepare for in Canada, including climate change, misinformation, government distrust, and a global recession. The report says the global community has experienced a series of crises with COVID-19, supply chain issues, and the Russian invasion of Ukraine, all sending shockwaves throughout the world. And then in the report's introduction, it says the situation will probably deteriorate further in the next 5 years as the early effects of climate change and a global recession add their weight to the ongoing crises. This is actually a report that came out, it was completed in 2023, last year. Says that basically what it's saying is a lot of things are unstable, which is what we were just talking about in that previous phone call. And we had this story, this information about a week and a half ago. I know that at least one or two other media outlets also had it. I think CBC had it back then as well. And now CTV getting the same information a little bit later, but still worth looking at. And here's a copy of the actual study. And the concern here, of course, is that it's destabilizing for the country. It may actually, in a way, put national security at risk. I think these destabilizing elements, the pandemic, just the resulting growth in the distrust of government overreach, the the heavy-handed nature, authoritarian nature of the government response to the Freedom Convoy, other protests, mounting concern about issues like immigration, the value of the dollar, inflation, the economic situation in Canada in general. All of these concerns very destabilizing, to the point where this report, which you see right here, says that Canada may actually be in some sort of existential jeopardy. I'm using that phrase, not necessarily in this report directly. But it says the global community has experienced a series of crises with COVID-19 supply chain issues and the Russian invasion of Ukraine, all sending shockwaves through the world. We read all of that. Based on open source information from 2022, 0606 to 2022, October 30th, the following scanning exercise identifies shifts, signals of change in the domestic and international environments that could have a significant effect on the Canadian government and the RCMP. All of this open source, which means a lot of this is coming from online and probably from listening to people. This is supposed to be a secret document now made public, but a lot of it redacted. As a result of scanning exercise, 6 overarching considerations, it says here, are presented here for decision makers, which are then followed by a more detailed outline below. While evaluating strategic advice and making choices for the organization's long-term success, decision makers should, and it doesn't let us see what they want to do to us, or for us, or with us, or probably to us. It says law enforcement should expect continuing social and political polarization fueled by misinformation campaigns and an increasing mistrust for all democratic institutions. Goes on further and says law enforcement should anticipate that criminals will leverage technological innovations to gain profit and influence. Law enforcement should also continue to contribute to policy change relating to the privacy of personal information, artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, quantum computing, digital ledger technology, and more. And it calls for a whole of government 5-year trends for Canada here. It says over the course of the next 5 years, environmental scientists expect that increasingly violent and even concurrent storms, worsening drought, floods, and persistent heat waves all over the globe will reduce the global output of a variety of commodities. Law enforcement should anticipate that these destructive weather patterns will affect all facets of government, including damage to critical infrastructure, increasing pressure to cede Arctic territory, and more. Down here it says emergency management planning should be considered by law enforcement decision makers to ensure continued levels of service delivery. Capacity building through the attraction and retention of qualified staff remains a challenge to law enforcement. It says here that the geopolitical, economic, social, technological, and environmental shifts presented here are examples and continue to evolve. They can disrupt or redefine law enforcement work and operations in unexpected ways. Both minor and major shifts have the potential to cause multifaceted disruptive change across the organization. But more than that, I mean, the climate change stuff, I think, honestly, I think that's personally not where they should be focusing their attention. That's my opinion. Polar resentment here, the coming period of recession. This is what they need to be worried about, because the dollar is tanking. Will also accelerate the decline in living standards that the younger generations have already witnessed compared to earlier generations. For example, many Canadians under 35 are unlikely ever to be able to buy a place to live. The fallout from this decline in living standards will be exacerbated by the fact that the difference between the extremes of wealth is greater now in developed countries than it has been at any time in several generations. It cites the erosion of trust in government. It talks about paranoid populism. What does that mean? Let's read it. Capitalizing on the rise of political polarization and conspiracy theories have been populists willing to tailor their messages to appeal to extremist movements. Authoritarian movements have been on the rise in many liberal democratic nations. We are indeed seeing that. Big data. Through such mechanisms as social media, the Internet of Things, and biometric identifiers, big data is and will increasingly be available on a scale that is difficult to quantify. Access to this data will allow private entities to develop the means to exercise undue influence over individuals and populations at an unprecedented level. It talks here about artificial intelligence, and that is an area that we all need to be concerned about because that is going to be extremely disruptive technology. And, just as a sidebar, I did receive a message from a viewer overnight who referred to you guys, the viewers, the family, the community, the Maverick family, as being very smart, indicating that's why you guys actually watch this program, which I really, truly appreciated because we do deal with a lot of complicated issues. We deal with philosophy, religion, economics, certainly politics, science, geography, issues of war and peace, and artificial intelligence, which this report addresses in this way, saying artificial intelligence, AI, the use of evolving computer algorithms to help computers, vehicles, robots, and other machines perceive, reason, learn, and plan is expected to have a significant impact on government operations in the coming 5 years. That's how fast this is happening. My guess is in a year, you're going to see major changes because AI is growing at an exponential rate. AI, it says here, will enhance and assist decision-making by helping coordinate operational resources, finding patterns in vast data sets, and boosting productivity in a wide range of endeavors. One especially concerning use of AI for the next 5 years is the deep fake, and in particular, the deep fake of important and famous people. Indeed, we're seeing that happen now. AI, faked videos, images, documents, even websites, all designed to deceive, mislead, and manipulate in ways that not only can affect your views of the world, your decisions, your attitudes, your mood, but also the way you even vote, what you decide to eat for lunch, what you buy when you go to the supermarket, or what you buy online. Quantum computing also identified here as a disruptive technology. It is possible that quantum computing, it says, will be available within the next 5 years. That will be a huge game changer as well. Blockchain. Everybody's worried about central bank digital currencies, right? In a way, it's already sort of here with Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, but it says blockchain. It goes beyond that, though, as many of you already have clued into. Blockchain technology is not just for things like Bitcoin or digital currency. It can be used and employed in a variety of other ways as well. Blockchain is a data storing structure currently used in virtual currencies such as Bitcoin, it says. Blockchain technology will enable and enhance other emerging technologies like AI, machine learning, additive manufacturing, and autonomous vehicles. Blockchain systems record transaction data on a ledger that is distributed. That is, there is no central trusted authority. All nodes or users in the network hold and maintain a copy of the data set, immutable. That is, once added to the ledger, transactions cannot typically be undone or altered. and agreed to by consensus. That is, transactions can only be added to the ledger with the approval of specified nodes in the network. The advantage of blockchain systems over other databases is that they can operate securely without centralized oversight and control. That is, zero trust. Have you seen the price of Bitcoin lately? It is crazy. It is absolutely nuts. Let's check the price just as we do this on the fly. Bitcoin price. Tonight is at $94,989.99 Canadian dollars. Is that insane? That's a major increase, man. And what is Bitcoin? It is just bits and bytes, little computer bits and bytes. That's the equivalent of 69,930 US dollars at this moment. I go back a year ago, it was at 27,000. It has more than doubled in the past year in price. That's why a lot of people just hold. They buy and hold. And people think that the price is just going to keep on going up. But I'll tell you this, based on the lessons from the past, don't you believe it, folks? What goes up must come down at some point. What goes up must come down. Right now, you have a lot of people sort of buying into Bitcoin. This is my opinion, and it is not financial advice. I'm not a financial planner. But Bitcoin has proven to be a very volatile currency. And it has severely dipped at times, and then it keeps on coming back up. So, yeah, I can only advise caution to anybody that might be thinking of putting money into Bitcoin. I own a little tiny bit of Bitcoin that I bought, some years ago, and I've just been sitting on it too. It's just sitting there. And it's not worth that because I don't have a whole Bitcoin. I bought when it was already so high that you have to buy like a little piece of Bitcoin because you don't have to buy the whole thing. All that being said, as you can see, the country's in a state of extreme volatility. A lot of people, not just looking to things like gold for economic stability, but to Bitcoin, the cryptocurrencies, all based on blockchain technology. Again, unprecedented times, new technology. And yet, I'll tell you this too. Regardless of what people may think about Bitcoin, even Bitcoin ultimately will be subject to the natural laws of supply and demand, the natural forces of economics. Economics is not just about, it's not just like some man-made construct. It is a natural phenomenon. And Bitcoin is subject to that in the same way that the dollar is too. You can manipulate Mother Nature for a while, but as I say, what goes up must come down. It's just the law of nature. So beware. Just beware. It just has to be. I don't know when, I don't know how, I don't know if it's going to go up or down. It might come down, it might go back up, it'll come down, and it will go back up again. But that's the thing about value of the stock market, the value of the dollar, or the value of Bitcoin, the value of anything. It's all subject to the laws of nature. And that's what the RCMP report is all about as well. It's about economic instability largely. It's about social change, technological change, people losing their jobs in the future to technology, Other people profiting immensely because they will harness the power and the productivity of these new technologies like AI. So some people will make it very well. Other people who do not adapt, who are not able to change and shift with the times and adapt, they'll potentially be left behind. And this could be very disruptive for our country. And yet at the same time, it holds so much promise. AI, for instance, could be our ticket out of this economic mess. If we can use AI to leverage productivity and harness immense growth with it, and it is entirely possible that we can do that through a combination of AI and even robotics, then maybe we can grow our way out of this. But we need vision, we need leadership, we need leaders who understand the technology, the social implications, and can figure out how to respond to it in an appropriate way with shifts in legislation, shifts in policy, shifts in the approach to the future. And that's not going to be easy. Unfortunately, right now, I'm just wondering if any of the people who present themselves to us as our potential future leaders really have a deep enough understanding, or if they have the intellect needed to guide us in a proper way heading into the future. Let's cross our fingers. Let's hope. Let's pray on this 25th day of March, 2024. And let us all pray for peace. Folks, I'll be back tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on the Maverick News Channel, where we have the antivirus programs for your mind. Catch you on the flip side.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.